Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy's The Hindu News Analysis. Today is 11th December 2025 and today we have some very important topics from different newspapers, and one by one we'll be discussing all these topics in a very detailed manner. And this discussion is also very helpful for your prelims and mains examinations. So without any further delay, let's get into the discussion and let's understand these topics in detailed manner. And the first topic with which we're going to start this session is a very important topic on India's economic growth. So let's understand about this. So recently it has been found out that India has been growing at a 8.2% per annum. Now, in fact, if you look at all the major economies in the world, so India's economic growth rate is top notch. India is also growing at a faster pace because achieving or growing at 8.2% per annum is not a small feat. So therefore, let's understand whether this economic growth is really sustainable or not. So this is very, very important from the exam point of view, particularly for General Studies paper 3, right? So you have to understand that this quarter the growth rate is 8.2%. So in this context, so let's find out whether India's growth is sustainable or not. Now, in fact, so recent macroeconomic performance of India, so the macroeconomic performance, it actually takes into account all the major sectors, right? So therefore there is a strong output expansion that has been observed in the Indian macroeconomic growth. So apart from that, you can also observe a robust domestic demand as well in India and resilient external sector. So you can see that these are a strong pull factors with respect to a growing economy. For example, India is growing at 8.2% per annum. So therefore, all these factors have majorly contributed for India's robust economic growth. So despite 8.2% growth rate per annum, now there are certain concerns. So what concerns that we have? Now, if we talk about the concerns, so the first concern is structural vulnerabilities that we have. And in fact, Reserve Bank of India has already highlighted that there are some structural vulnerabilities within the Indian economy, right? So these structural vulnerabilities may affect India's long-term growth trajectory. So this is what Reserve Bank of India has highlighted with respect to the growth rate in India. So however, let's understand the recent trends and strength of the recovery in the Indian economy. Now, if you look at the Indian economy, strong GDP and GVA performance can be observed very clearly because, so as we have just discussed, that economic growth is 8.2%. So this is the GDP growth that India has actually achieved. So therefore, this 8.2% GDP growth indicating a genuine economic momentum beyond the post-pandemic recovery. Now, after the pandemic, India has grown at a robust pace. So this 8.2% GDP growth rate is a remarkable feat on the part of India. However, if you look at the real gross value added or GVA, it has been increased from 82.88 lakh crore to 89.41 lakh crore. So therefore, it has been reflecting growth in agriculture, industry and services in real terms. So if we talk about the real terms of economic growth, so it is being adjusted to inflation in the economy, right? So therefore, you can observe a real and a robust economic growth rate on this front. However, so let's understand the sectoral momentum in this context, because manufacturing sector has grown at a 9.1%. So this 9.1% growth rate from the manufacturing sector, it has been showing a strong factory utilization, and it has also increased the industrial demand. However, if you look at the performance of the service sector, what you could actually observe from the performance, so 60% of India's GDP comes from the service sector. So very well known fact it is. And in fact, it has been expanded at just 9.2% with financial services at 10.2%. However, so this growth rate in the service sector is driven by higher credit activity and strong urban consumption. However, if you look at the private consumption, the private consumption has been increased by 7.9%. So this has been indicating that there is a strong upward trajectory when it comes to enhanced household demand, right? So it has been indicating that there has been an enhanced household demand. However, the agriculture sector on its part has registered just 3.5% growth. It is being aided by better better reservoir levels, better water levels, and even the strong horticulture output as well, because water supply is very, very important for better produce. So therefore, these factors also helped agriculture sector to grow with a decent percentage of growth rate. Now, let's understand the macroeconomic stability indicators. We have understood all different sectors and the growth trajectories. We have understood industry, service sector, agriculture sector, and even the domestic consumption as well. However, if you look at the macroeconomic stability indicators, first we need to look into the inflation numbers and the monetary stability in India. Now, inflation. So what exactly is inflation? So inflation is the general price rise in the economy is known as inflation. However, inflation high in previous years but eased substantially and even fell below the target towards a late 2024 and 25. So therefore, it has been indicating that inflation has been coming down, first thing. The second thing, banks also exhibited healthy credit growths as well. Now, healthy credit growth, strong balance sheets, capital buffers. So all these factors have been reflecting a positive momentum in the Indian economy to grow at a rapid and a robust pace. So let's understand the fiscal and external sector health as well. If you look at the fiscal health of Indian economy, the center adhered to fiscal consolidation, and this fiscal consolidation is further supported by GST and even the direct tax collections increase. So these two factors have provided a robust support to the fiscal consolidation measures by the government. And external sector still remained stable in this context. For example, the small current account deficits which are existing, and healthy service exports and diversified forex reserves. So all these factors have been indicating that the external sector still remain stable. So this is all indicating that the positive momentum within the Indian economy. However, so International Monetary Fund's grade C is a concern over the data quality. So let's understand about this as well. Now, in fact, the International Monetary Fund, the monetary agency at the international level, assigned India grade C in the national income accounting. However, what are the concerns why IMF has given the grade C in national income accounting to India? So because there are certain statistical and methodological gaps which are existing. For example, the use of outdated data. So use of outdated data because the base year is 2011 and 2012. So there is a need to revise this base year, the first thing. Second thing is dependence on wholesale price indices instead of the producer price indices. So majority of the countries have been depending on the producer price indices rather than the wholesale price indices. So this is another major reason. And apart from that, over reliance or over dependence on single deflation, and it has been causing the potential cyclical biases in the Indian economy. This could be another major reason. And apart from that, there are certain discrepancies which are existing between the production and expenditure estimates in India. So this reflects poor data quality, and apart from that, the lack of seasonally adjusted data and gaps in state level fiscal statistics post 2019. Now, in fact, these are all the factors that could be the major reason why IMF has assigned grade C for the national income accounting. However, what will be the implications because of all these challenges that we have just understood and known? So if you look at the challenges or the implications, so this grading by IMF highlights a weak institutional and statistical capacity which is existing in India. right? So even when this macroeconomic outlook is strong, because we have just understood the macroeconomic outlook, how different sectors have been performing, the external sector and the fiscal performance of the government, and we have also understood the agriculture sector, service sector, industry, and the domestic consumption. We have understood everything. So everything through the data, and it reflects a strong macroeconomic outlook. So despite that, there existing a weak institutional and statistical capacity, and that has been reflected by the grade C for national income accounting in India by the International Monetary Fund. Now, let's understand some structural vulnerabilities which are highlighted by the Reserve Bank of India. These structural vulnerabilities may threaten the long-term sustainability. So what structural vulnerabilities are existing in this context? So one such structural vulnerability is uneven sectoral recovery. We have a different sectors. Now all sectors are not recovering within equal pace. For example, there is a robust recovery in some sectors, but some sectors still lagged behind. So it has been indicating that there is an uneven recovery in different sectors. Right? For example, if you look at mining, so it has only 0.04% growth due to the extended monsoon. Now in India, because of extended monsoon, mining may not be possible. The conditions may not exist to continue mining in such during monsoon. So therefore mining grow just 0.04%. So therefore still a robust potential for the mining to grow at a rapid pace. First thing. The second thing is that electricity and utility output. So it has grown just 4.4%, and it reflects a sluggish industrial backbone. So however, the primary and secondary sectors, they actually employ millions. For example, primary sector is agriculture and allied sectors. Secondary sector, industry and manufacturing. So it is true that they employ millions, but they contribute modestly to the value creation in India. So the focus should be on the value creation from the primary and secondary sectors of the economy, and the focus should also be on other sectors of the economy which are lagged behind. For example, mining sector, electricity, utility. So these sectors have to be grown at a rapid pace. Now apart from that, we have to understand the labor market mismatches which are existing. So what exactly is this labor market mismatches? Now in fact, so one thing I would say that industry demands something and labor lacks the same. For example, when you have a labor force and labor force is not having skills, then the industry may not employ the labor force. However, the industry require skilled workforce. Here, India's employment structure does not align with the output structure of most of these industries. And apart from that, the large share of workforce remain engaged in low productivity agriculture sector and other informal services. However, if you look at the service sector, now service sector is not a labor intensive sector because it employs a very less number of people, and it also requires higher skills as well. So therefore service sector provides lower employment opportunities. However, agriculture and industry have the higher potential of creating large scale employment opportunities. The focus should be on making agriculture, industry, manufacturing more and more labor intensive, more and more profitable and productivity oriented. So which is very important. So let's understand some external risks that may threaten India's long-term growth sustainability as well, right? Because Indian economy may face risks from other economies worldwide. For example, rising global protectionism. So what are the examples of this protectionism? Protectionism has been growing in Europe. Protectionism has been growing in America. For example, America First policies, the tariff wars imposed by US President Donald Trump, trade wars. So all these are the reflection of growing protectionism around the world, and tariff uncertainties are also being growing, right, because of the unpredictable nature of US under Donald Trump. So the tariff uncertainties are also growing, so it may threaten. For example, if you look at Indian economy, India exports a lot of goods to US and European markets. If they come up with tariffs, then Indian exports to those economies, those countries will become less. Now, apart from that, there are certain geopolitical tensions as well. So these geopolitical tensions should also be kept in mind because they have also the potential to threaten India's sustainability in terms of economic growth. So these are the aspects which may be considered as external risks. However, we are optimistic that in future India may experience a good economic growth rate, right? So let's understand another very important topic, which is about the selection of Chief Election Commissioner in India. Now, in fact, in Parliament, there is a regular debate and discussion about the removal of Chief Justice of India from the selection panel, and that panel's role is to select the Chief Election Commissioner. So let's understand this in very detail. So this is very important, right? Now, so let's understand about this Election Commission of India first. Now, Election Commission of India is an independent constitutional body. It has been provided by the Indian Constitution under Article 324 of the Indian Constitution. Clear? And in fact, the Election Commission of India conduct elections to Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, President of India and Vice President of India, and it also conduct elections to State Legislative Assembly plus State Legislative Council. Right? So this is the responsibility of the Election Commission of India to conduct elections to all these different bodies. However, when was this Election Commission of India established? It was established on 25th January 1950, and this day is celebrated as National Voters' Day. Now, as I have already told you that in part 15 of the Indian Constitution, from Article 324 to Article 329 of the Indian Constitution, it talks about the Election Commission of India and its powers. However, what is the structure of the Election Commission of India? Now, if you look at the structure of the Election Commission of India, so this Election Commission of India will have one Chief Election Commissioner plus two other election commissioners, right? So this is the structure. However, after India's independence, Election Commission of India is a single member body. However, in 1990s, President has provided additional 2 election commissioners, so therefore it has become a multi-member body. Right. So what is the tenure of Chief Election Commissioners and other election commissioners? The tenure is 6 years or 65 years, whichever is earlier. However, now in fact, the election commissioners are also eligible for the reappointment by the government. So for example, if these election commissioners, if they are retired after serving as election commissioners, so they are eligible for reappointment under the government as well. How? Chief Election Commissioner is removed. Chief Election Commissioner will be removed on the same grounds as the judge of the Supreme Court. Right? So he can be removed through like a judge of the Supreme Court. So that actually requires a special majority in the parliament of both houses to be removed. Right? So in fact, so in order to remove the Chief Election Commissioner, so 100 members from Lok Sabha and 50 members from Rajya Sabha must support this first, and then it will be submitted to the speaker in case of Lok Sabha or chairman in case of Rajya Sabha, right? So speaker and chairman will adopt this motion, and then they will start investigating the charges, constituting a committee, and all these things will happen with respect to the removal of Chief Election Commissioner. But let's understand how the Chief Election Commissioner is appointed, what is the issue, what is Supreme Court's judgment on this context. Right. Now, in fact, so one thing that we should say here, Article 324 of the Indian Constitution, it provides for the Election Commission of India. Now, Election Commission of India is an independent constitutional body, and it plays a very important role in ensuring free and fair elections in India. Right. So now, in fact, in India, we have a democratic political system. To sustain this democratic political system, Election Commission of India plays a very important role, because Election Commission of India ensures free and fair elections in India. Right. So in fact, the process of appointment of Chief Election Commissioners has undergone a significant scrutiny in recent years, because there is an excessive executive interference in the appointment of a chief election commissioner and other election commissioners. So it may threaten the independence of the Election Commission of India. Now, in fact, this scrutiny over the appointment of a chief election commissioner has been leading to a major legal and legislative developments. So let's understand this as well. Now, what constitutional provisions are there for the appointment of a chief election commissioner? Now, Article 324 clause 2 of the Indian Constitution. So it states that President shall appoint a chief election commissioner. So President shall appoint a chief election commissioner plus other election commissioners. So who is the appointing authority? President. President is the appointing authority of the chief election commissioner and other election commissioners. However, it also specifies the manner of appointment should be subjected to any law made by the Parliament. Now, in case if Parliament makes any law, then the manner of appointment is subjected to that law made by the Parliament. However, Parliament, after India's independence, Parliament has not enacted any law which has provided for the manner of appointment of a chief election commissioner. Right? So therefore, right from India's independence, the appointment of a chief election commissioner is just an executive discretion. So that is the problem here. That's why the opposition political parties have been questioning the independence of the election commission and the functioning of the chief election commissioners and other election commissioners, because President can appoint chief election commissioner and other election commissioners, and President works on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, which is the government. Right. However, Supreme Court has given a landmark judgment in the year 2023, and the Supreme Court has provided for a collegium style appointments to the chief election commissioner and other election commissioners. Let's understand what Supreme Court has said. What is this specific case? Supreme Court in Anup Baranwal versus Union of India case. So this case was in March 2023. Anup Baranwal versus Union of India. Now, in this case, Supreme Court has delivered a landmark judgment, right? So this judgment focuses on strengthen the election commission. However, so what are the key directions of the Supreme Court in Anup Baranwal versus Union of India judgment? Now, in fact, we knew that Parliament has not made any law to provide manner of appointment of a chief election commissioner and other election commissioners. However, the Supreme Court has clarified that until Parliament makes a law, chief election commissioners and other election commissioners, they must be appointed by a 3-member committee, and this 3-member committee consisting of Chief Minister, Leader of Opposition in Lok Sabha and Chief Justice of India. So this 3-member committee will appoint chief election commissioner and other election commissioners to the Election Commission of India to ensure independent nature of the Election Commission of India as a constitutional body. Is it clear? So now let's understand. The court has reasoned that insulation from executive or providing independence to the Election Commission of India from the executive dominance was essential to conduct free and fair elections to strengthen the democratic political system in India. And in fact, the judgment has also cited examples of constitutional bodies such as Central Vigilance Commission, Lokpal, where there is a selection panels. These selection panels also include leader of opposition parties and even the judicial interference, so that it can ensure greater neutrality and transparency in the appointment process for the appointments to these constitutional bodies. However, what rationale has been given by the Supreme Court when it has been coming up with such a panel for the selection of chief election commissioner plus other election commissioners? The court has noted that the government effectively had a monopoly over the appointment, because this is just an executive discretion. So therefore, such executive discretion should not exist when it comes to making appointments for an important body like a Election Commission of India, which is a constitutional body, which is also very important for conducting free and fair elections. First thing. The second thing, it emphasizes on the independence of the Chief Election Commissioner, and it is crucial for the credibility of Indian democratic system. Right. Now, so, however, in Anup Baranwal versus Union of India judgment, the Supreme Court has provided for a 3-member panel. So, immediately after judgment, the Parliament has enacted a law to change the judgment, to change the panel of members. Now, in this panel of members, the Chief Justice of India has been removed. Chief Justice of India has been removed, and it has included any other cabinet rank minister. Right. Now let's understand this. So immediately after this judgment given by the Supreme Court, so Parliament passed a law in the year 2023. So this law has replaced Chief Justice of India with a cabinet minister. Right. So in December 2023, Parliament enacted a law called as Chief Election Commissioners and Other Election Commissioners Act of 2023. Now, in this act, a new selection panel has been appointed. So this new selection panel is consisting of Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition in the Lok Sabha, and the Union Cabinet Minister who is nominated by the Prime Minister. Right. So, however, what change you could observe? The change is Chief Justice of India is replaced with a Cabinet Minister who is nominated by the Prime Minister. Right. So this is how the opposition has been protesting in the Parliament why there is a need to replace Chief Justice of India. Why there is a need to include cabinet minister, because this further increases the executive discretion when it comes to the appointment of the chief election commissioners and other election commissioners. It will further continue the dominance of the executive, because so if any two members accepts any candidate as a chief election commissioner and other election commissioner, so he will be appointed as a chief election commissioner. Even if the leader of opposition in Lok Sabha opposes a candidate, then also a candidate who is getting the support of at least two members will be appointed. So that is the main problem here. Right. Now in this context, what implications it will be having? Now, however, if you look at the implications, the Chief Justice of India was removed from the panel and included the cabinet minister who is nominated by the prime minister. So therefore it further restores the executive dominance, right? So because the government still holds the 2:1 majority in this panel, this is the first thing. However, the opposition has been criticizing this legislation because it undermines the spirit of the Supreme Court judgment. This is the problem here. And in fact, the leader of opposition, who is Rahul Gandhi in Lok Sabha, so he expressed a dissent. So noting that I have no voice in that room, highlighting that there are certain concerns about the imbalance in decision making. Such an important and such a crucial body, but still giving dominance to the executive. However, so there is a debate about the democratic concerns on this. A new law has been rekindled debate on whether election commission can remain truly autonomous if appointments remain government controlled. Secondly, there are examples such as Central Vigilance Commission, Information Commission, which use the balanced selection committees, are often cited to argue for a similar safeguards must be for the Election Commission of India to protect its autonomy and independence, insulate it from the executive dominance. So this is the key concern here. I hope you have understood the procedure for the appointment of a chief election commissioner and other election commissioners. So let's understand another very important topic, which is protected marine areas. They're not actually part of offshore blocks, and it has been announced by the government. So let's look into it, what exactly it has been mentioning. Now, in fact, the mineral resources. So mineral resources may be categorized into two different types. Now, offshore mineral resources and onshore mineral resources. Now, in fact, this offshore mineral resources are those mineral resources which are within and beyond the coast. And onshore mineral resources existed on the territory or on the land. So these are two different types of mineral resources. However, the Union government has understood the ecological concerns which are existing to the marine biodiversity because of these offshore mineral resources which are located within the coastal areas and beyond the coastal areas. Within and beyond coastal areas, because of this oil drilling exploration, they may cause harm to the existing biodiversity and livelihood of the coastal communities. So therefore, the Union government has said that marine protected areas, MPAs, marine protected areas, will not be used for mining of minerals, because if these marine protected areas, if the auction takes place over the minerals which are located in these marine protected areas, they may threaten the existing biodiversity, ecosystem, ecology, and even threaten the livelihoods of the coastal communities. Right. So therefore, the 23 offshore blocks have been proposed. 13 sand blocks in Kerala, 3 limestone blocks in Gujarat, and 7 polymetallic blocks in Andaman Nicobar Islands as mineral blocks which are part of the marine protected areas. Right? So therefore, the fisher families and green activities have expressed concerns over depleting marine livestock. However, the Offshore Mineral Trust has been established with coastal states as members in this Offshore Mineral Trust and executive committee of the trust. Right. Now, in this context, let's understand this offshore mining in India and what are the issues which are existing, what are the concerns, and what is the government's response to it. Now, in fact, India's recent move to auction offshore mineral blocks. For example, these offshore mineral blocks including sand, limestone, polymetallic nodules, and even crust deposits. So this auction of offshore mineral blocks has triggered a widespread debate on the ecological sustainability and fishermen's livelihood. And apart from that, the regulatory safeguards as well. So therefore, the Ministry of Earth Sciences has clarified in the Parliament that all offshore blocks which are delineated after 130 marine protected areas. Right? So therefore, let's understand a quick background of offshore mining proposal. So auction was announced on November 2024. 13 offshore sand blocks of Kerala, 33 lime mud blocks of Gujarat, and 7 polymetallic nodule or crust blocks near Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Right. So as of now, no company has been selected from the auction to explore these mineral resources from various states. However, so there has been a widespread political and social opposition to this because Kerala has started a widespread protests cutting across party lines, and even the fishing communities, the coastal communities are warned of threats to marine biodiversity and fish stocks, and even Kerala Assembly also passed a resolution in March opposing such an action from the government. However, so government safeguards and regulatory measures in this context. Now, 130 marine protected areas are notified by the Ministry of Environment, and 106 important coastal and marine biodiversity areas are identified and prioritized by the government. And government states that the offshore blocks were carved out after excluding these ecologically sensitive regions. However, so let's understand the environmental oversight under the Offshore Mineral Resources Exploration and Development Rules of 2023. Right. So these offshore areas mineral conservation and development rules 2024. No production and operation is allowed without production plan in those areas firstly. And apart from that, it has clearly mentioned that the plan must include the baseline environment data, impact assessment, and mitigation measures. They must be carried out so that there will be adequate safeguards for the exploration of these mineral resources. So there are some institutional mechanisms also which have been established. So those institutional mechanisms are Offshore Areas Mineral Trust. Now in this offshore areas mineral trust, all coastal states are members of its governing body and executive committee. And the funds will also be used for environmental research, monitoring in those areas, administrative and scientific studies, and even mitigation of ecological impacts which are arising from the offshore operations. However, the mining presents opportunity for resource security but raises serious ecological and livelihood concerns for the people. So what is India's approach in this context? So if we talk about India's approach in this context, balancing extraction with environmental safeguards must rely on transparent assessments, participatory governance with coastal communities, and even strict enforcement of environmental norms to ensure sustainable use of the marine resources, right? So this is the approach that India has to follow with respect to exploration of mineral resources offshore to protect the livelihoods of the coastal communities, ecology, and even marine biodiversity. So let's understand another very important topic. So Deepavali has enters intangible cultural heritage list, right? So therefore UNESCO prepares a list of intangible cultural heritage. So already UNESCO has included a number of such cultural heritage into the UNESCO cultural heritage in India. For example, Kudiyattam from Kerala, Mudiyat from Kerala, Vedic chanting of Ladakh, Vedic chanting, Ramleela, Ramman, and Kalbailia, Chow dance, and even Ladakh Buddhist chanting, Manipuri Sankirtana, traditional brass making of Punjab, yoga, and even Kumbh Mela. So all these factors have already been included in the UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage. This is a very important topic, and recently Deepavali has also been entered into Intangible Heritage list. So therefore, let's understand the intangible cultural heritage, its significance, UNESCO's recognition, and India's contribution to this list. Now, in fact, this intangible cultural heritage refers to a living tradition or expressions, knowledge or practices of different communities that inherit and transmit across generations. They are being transmitted from one generation to another generation. However, the UNESCO's representative list of intangible cultural heritage, it aims to strengthen and safeguard practices that foster identity, continuity, and cultural diversity. In 2024, Deepavali, which is India's biggest festival of lights, was inscribed into the UNESCO's list of intangible cultural heritage because it reflects the global acknowledgement of India's vibrant and cultural traditions, right? So therefore, this 20th IGC session 2024, right? So it has been inscribed during UNESCO's 20th Intergovernmental Committee session, which has been attended by around 194 member states, and a ceremony held at Red Fort signifying the cultural prestige for the occasion. So in fact, it has acknowledges that Deepavali is a cultural heritage promoting social bonding, generosity, and even communal harmony, well-being across the country. Right, so that's all for today, and thank you so much, and please subscribe our YouTube channel and like the video, and if you have any suggestions for us, you can write those suggestions in the comment section. Thank you so much.